All right, we got a great episode coming up for you today as the Brooklyn Nets come from behind to take down the Dallas Mavericks on the road on the backs of strong defensive play and the offensive output of one Kevin Durant, James Harden, and of course, Patty Mills. We're going to break down what had a playoff energy vibe to it, Doug. This was a really good win that showed you some of the things that I think can be footprints for success for Brooklyn going forward.
Oh, baby, on the road, coming off a loss, adjustments in game. This national TV, Reggie Miller on the call. Like, this was a full-on playoff atmosphere. I loved it. I was here for every single second of it. I think you're gonna hear the energy coming through here because this was a fun one. This is a great win by the Nets. We're gonna get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am at Adam Armbrecht and covering the New York Football Giants for the One Giant podcast. Over there, you can see the ever blue checkmark certified Doug Norrie, also giving you your DFS needs, a DFSR for DraftKings, FanDuel. If you need your daily projections, Doug Norrie has you covered. And of course, we remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Truebill. You can go ahead and get the new app that saves you money by helping identify and stop paying for the subscriptions that you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals for those that you want to keep. We, of course, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, available on all those great platforms. Doug, 102-99, come from behind victory on the road for the Brooklyn Nets, avoiding losing a back-to-back game, which they have not done this season. How did it feel as the surge came on here for Brooklyn after what kind of felt like a night when it was going to get away from them and maybe never be able to get it back, really?
Yeah, this was a great win, man. On the road in Dallas, you saw why you have superstars on your team. You saw like what Kevin Durant, even when he's not scoring, like the gravity that he commands during late in the game, and other teams like basically freak out when he has the ball, or like, proverbially freak out when it comes to defense. And we'll get into the whole game here, but just that fourth quarter was just a concentration of Kevin Durant, James Harden, throwing a little Patty Mills, some defense, and it's just this is what happens when these guys get rolling, right? Like when it kind of like clicks. This was a game late, not the whole game, but late. This was a game that clicked for them, led by Durant, and I just couldn't have been happier. I was like, I really was not going to want a podcast if it was a loss based on how well they played in that fourth quarter. Like based on everything we saw in that fourth quarter, the storming back, coming back from, they were down 17 at one point, and to make it all the way back on the back of the superstars was awesome. That was just an awesome win in Dallas.
Yep, and they're now 9-2 on the road, so always good to have that type of ability on the road to get W's. Like you said, there were some adjustments that the Nets made. Obviously, it was a back and forth between Steve Nash and Jason Kidd. It had a bit of an energy to it. So there's a lot of other things we want to get to defensively and how kind of things played out from the first half and then what the Nets were able to do in the second half. But to your point, this was a game where the Nets were down by as many as 17. Down by 11 at the start of the fourth quarter. And I said to you before we got on, they did a little, post third quarter interview with Jason Kidd, said, hey, how do you just kind of lock this one up? And he said, they got two really good players over there in Kevin Durant and James Harden. You can't take anything for granted. And in the first 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, the Nets had closed it down to a 3-point deficit, forced a timeout from Dallas. And then, really, in a game where it seemed like the Nets couldn't get any momentum with consistency against Dallas, that was it. The surge started right there, and even though it was back and forth, it did very much feel like this was going to go the Nets' way after the way they opened up the fourth.
Yeah, they open up that fourth. Durant hits a shot, makes a three-pointer. Mills drains a three, and all of a sudden you see, or at least Dallas sees, what happens when Harden, and you throw in a Harden floater too. Like those three guys basically this is what happens when those three guys open up a quarter against like another team's second unit, right?
Yeah.
Because that was the end of the lead. It was really the whole game. I know that they've kind of fought for the next 10 minutes or so, but from a momentum perspective, when you look back at that moment where Kid calls the timeout because the lead is just totally evaporated in 3 minutes or whatever, and it's because you had a lesser personnel against guys that you just cannot afford to have lesser personnel against, and all of a sudden they're like Kevin Durant's an assassin. He's a cheat code. Like it just when he gets into it, if you do not have it dialed in, especially late, like when he's laser focused, look, games are long, things can happen over the course of a game. Late game, when he's focused on he wants to win, there's no more difficult person in the NBA to guard. Like, and we saw that in this game here. It's just another of many, many, many examples of Kevin Durant of like why you cannot even take your foot off the gas for a second with a guy like him. And then they got the contributions from the other two guys. Cause like in the end, the Nets scored 27 points in the fourth quarter. Harden, KD, and Mills scored 25 of them. Like 25 of the 27 points in that fourth were those three guys. Kevin Durant had 11. And like cheat code assassin, like Apex Predator, whatever you want to use. This is what you get. Dallas freaked out, and the other guys were able to capitalize a little bit on that piece of it too. And yeah, it was awesome. I'm not stumbling here. I'm trying to figure out new superlatives to say like the Kevin Durant. This is where you see why he's the best player in basketball.
Oh, of course. And it's funny too, because the game's going along, and I think we've seen this over the course of the season. Some games just feel like they're going to get away from you, but inevitably, if Kevin Durant can get going, and he ends up finishing, I think 50% from the field or right around there, right? 10 of 22, but he wasn't having a particularly good night. But once he starts knocking down those shots, you saw what it forced Dallas to have to do defensively. And then it is another like Harden kind of had one of his plodding along kind of games where he's getting some of his looks, he's getting some assists, but Patty Mills, who struggled with his shot. Well, as soon as Kevin Durant gets a couple going, now all of a sudden it opens it up a little bit. And at the very least, Patty Mills is a veteran player that is not going to shy away from those big opportunities. When he knocks down the corner three along the way here, that made him, I think, 3 of 8 from the field at that point. He had a very quiet night. But these are the three players, I think you would say, probably the hierarchy of it if you want to throw in LaMarcus Aldridge. But Kevin Durant, then James Harden, and over recent history here with the Nets, it's been Patty Mills that has been able to really spark some nice scoring spurts for the Nets too. So I want to kind of get into
hold on, just about Mills real quick too. Eight of Mills' 10 points were in the fourth.
Right.
Like he had 10 total points, 8 of them were in the fourth quarter. When the defense was over rotating onto Kevin Durant, they worked a little 2-man game between the two of them. They were able to make sure that KD was sort of isolated at times. Mills was a big part of that because you have to respect him for 3. But even when they brought doubles to Durant, like he was one of those guys that was able to capitalize. So, streaky shooter, whatever you want to say, like took a while to get into the game, like different ways you can frame the thing for Mills. In the end, it's like I hate to say it, it doesn't matter what you did the rest of the game because the rest of the game adds up for all the points also. But the part where it's close enough that these guys can feel it, like that is a dangerous situation for any team to be in because you do not want to leave the door cracked open even a little bit specifically Harden and Durant. And then like I'll throw Mills in it because he was good in this one. He's been pretty clutch overall. But you cannot leave the door cracked for these guys and have them start feeling it a little bit because you see what happens. And, sometimes I wish the Nets didn't have to expend this much energy for wins. Like you'd like some of them to be easy. Dallas is a good team, so you can't really, this is not the game you can have that happen with. But overall, like this was a very good example of when these three guys specifically can get going. We're gonna talk about Claxton and the defense here later, but when these three specific guys are able to get going, it's just gonna be a really tough road to hoe for any team that's not completely dialed in defensively.
And in a game too, because they were saying on the broadcast that with Porzingis and with Luka, 2 guys that haven't had, and really Porzingis more than anything. His level of consistency has kind of come and gone from a game-to-game basis. Here's when we're over the first 3 quarters. Both these guys are getting to work. They're having success. They're knocking down their looks. So to be able to come back in the fourth quarter, whatever level you want to put these guys at, those are the 2 best players over there. Harden and Durant are the 2 best players for Brooklyn, and they outduel them. Right. So it's, you mentioned at the top a little bit about the energy of this game, and that's what we're going to turn into here in a second. But at no point along the way did you see, and we haven't seen this throughout the entire season, Kevin Durant, Harden, the Nets overall, they really never got rattled by it. And ultimately, I think they stayed pretty calm throughout the first 3 quarters, almost knowing, hey, all I need to do is knock down a couple of shots and I'll be good to go.
Speaking of calm, do you know what makes LeBron James over there in LA? They're playing as we speak right now. What makes LeBron James, King James? That's sleep, baby. That's right. Sleep is his superpower. Calm. Yeah, I just mentioned the #1 app for sleep and meditation. They've teamed up with LeBron James to help you activate the power of sleep. Look, folks, sleep is important. Don't underrate this. Like, you lose sleep, like you're just going to lose kind of little bits of your life throughout the day, and then it kind of cascades. That's not a problem when you have Calm. LeBron and Calm know that your mind is like another muscle, any other muscle in your body. You don't have to be a world champion like King James to learn how to train it. Calm can help you train your brain so you sleep better, reduce your stress, perform at your best. For LeBron, sleep is a critical part of his mental fitness routine. Getting good sleep and finding time to rest is one of the most valuable things that LeBron says he can do for his body and mind. This guy continues to plug along as one of the greatest all time, folks. This is one of the reasons. If you go to calm.com/lockedonnba, calm.com/lockedonnba, for a limited time, you're going to get 40% off a premium subscription. With Calm, you have access to nature scenes. You can do sleep stories, meditations, anything that's going to help you get into that sleep mode. Again, for a limited time, our listeners can join LeBron James using Calm. Get a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/lockedonnba. Unlock content to help you focus, ease stress, sleep better. Get started at calm.com/lockedonnba. That's calm.com/lockedonnba.
And as we told you before, undoubtedly, the Brooklyn Nets in between that third and fourth quarter, they reached for a Built Bar because it gives you that extra fuel that you need to get over the hump and ultimately bring home some victories for yourself. And it's because there's so many delicious flavors over there you can choose from. Any number of Harden or Durant, Claxton that we're going to talk about here. They could reach for a salted caramel. They could reach for a mint chocolate chip. It doesn't matter. They're all delicious, and they're also going to give you fantastic little notes of stat lines that we like to talk about. That's because they're low in carbs, high in protein, low in sugar, all delicious, all great flavors. You may say that you're looking to get a nice little gift there to leave out for Santa Claus. A lot of people go cookies. This guy's put on some pounds over the years. We're all aware of it. Why not tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars your way, and you'll go ahead and leave out a couple for him the night before. You want to cozy up with something warm? Here's a holiday secret. Dip your Built Bars into the piping hot cocoa. Let it melt a little bit because it's covered in 100% chocolate, and you've got yourself a delicious little flavor there in a hot cup of cocoa. Like some of those marshmallowy treats around the holidays, why don't you go ahead and get your hands on a Built Bar Puffs? They're light, fluffy, and marshmallowy through and through. Different flavors, all covered in chocolate. Taste so good, you won't believe that they're filled with protein. You can go to Built.com right now and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off on your order. That is, of course, Built.com. Promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your next order. We said it there at the top. You have the superstars. They do the heavy lifting. And listen, as far as it goes this season, Patty Mills is now a Brooklyn Nets superstar as far as I'm concerned. But this game did have, you said it before we were getting on here. This is a quality team in the Dallas Mavericks. I know with this loss, they're now 11-12. And we said it before. Records aren't everything. They have a lot of really good weapons, and they have a lot of really good shooters, size, length, things that have given the Brooklyn Nets problems. This felt like the kind of game where you were seeing Steve Nash, and again, dueling with Jason Kidd, making adjustments and a little bit of that playoff kind of atmosphere where both teams seem to want this game a little bit more than game 27 on the schedule.
Oh, for sure. This had a playoff vibe to it, for sure.
Or 24,
TNT primetime game. These guys know it's on a national broadcast. It's the only game. Well, that's not true. The Knicks were playing too, but it's basically the only game on the only game. Then on at the time. And it's superstars. Like, people are going to tune into this stuff. The Nets have been a decent draw on national television so far. Luka is a good draw, especially internationally. So, like, there's going to be a lot of eyes in this game, and it definitely had the feel of this game. From an energy standpoint, getting into the fourth, you could tell both teams really wanted it, despite what, the Mavericks only had 13 points in the fourth quarter. Kudos to the Nets defense. But in terms of the Nets adjustments, the energy, all that stuff, I was getting that playoff vibe to this one. And you like to see that because that's just what makes basketball fun. Credit to Nash. This was one of Nash's better games. He did a bunch of different stuff here that he has not really done up until this point. Some of it's a personnel thing, but James Johnson got a lot of minutes because that matchup was really working. Claxton, we're going to talk a little bit more about him later, so I'm going to save that. But like in general, I thought the adjustments that Nash made had that, like, we're not just going to see what happens with like how we've been doing things feel to it, right? Like we're going to make some different rotations. The things that aren't working are going to go, and they're going to go quickly, right? Like Bembry barely played. Cam Thomas, like that wasn't really working. That's the kind of the 17 minutes. They just didn't feel like they needed his scoring. So I don't know. Did you get that vibe from it? Like this play, like this, or am I overstating it? Like I thought this had, maybe I'd have a different feel if they lost because I'm just kind of hyped up right now. But like it gave me that feeling at least.
No, the James Johnson, you mentioned James Johnson. Obviously, he played really well off the bench, but I think that was the big one where you saw, as you say, you look at Kleba, you look at Powell, you have Porzingis, you have all these guys that are lengthy, but they're not necessarily the most fleet of foot. So James Johnson is quick enough, in quotes if you're watching on YouTube, quick enough because he's just fast enough to get around them and get at the basket a few times. He had some outside shots as well. I think that it just made a lot of sense. And to your point, it was working, so you go with it. And in the past, over the course of this season, it's not even necessarily a knock on Nash. I think that he's just been willing to see if someone's going to play themselves into form over the course of a game. Whereas this one, maybe because of the way things were trending there and Dallas didn't put them away, right? I mean, they trailed by as many as 17, but by NBA standards, it needs to be a 25-point lead before the other team kind of says, all right, we're not going to really worry too much about trying to push on the gas here and get ourselves back involved in it. So I like leaning into him. The Cam Thomas piece, the Bembry piece, those are guys that of late, especially Bembry, has been having a bigger and bigger role, but you get away from him pretty quickly. And there, there's even some late sequences that I thought were good from Nash, where it's around like the 3.5 minute mark, maybe a little bit earlier in the fourth quarter. Nets get a nice defensive sequence. They come down the other end, and they're semi in transition, but Nash calls the timeout. And I think you saw Durant just a little curious as to why are you calling it here? But they came out of that sequence, and that was the immediate 17-foot jumper for Kevin Durant that brought them even in the game at that point. And I think that it just felt like Nash had a real sense of where the game was. And if I use my timeouts correctly, if I use my challenges correctly, right, at one point late in this one with James Harden reaching in on Luka, like everything just seemed to be pushing the right button on their side of it after three quarters where maybe it just felt like Dallas was able to do everything right as a byproduct. But Nash seemed to really know what he wanted to do here. Maybe it's a little bit of a gleam of Nash may have a better sense of what really works for this team on a game-to-game basis, and it just depends on whether or not he thinks this is an important one. This is one that we want to make sure that we get, where he'll maybe reveal a little bit more of his strategy overall for this team than in some other opportunities.
Yeah, I'm glad that timeout worked because I hated that timeout in the moment.
So did I, by the way. I was like, ooh, it looks like it's going to be like an open three on the wing. Like anything could happen here. And
yeah,
then
it just seemed like a weird time. The momentum, it was like they had momentum. It seemed like a weird time. It ended up working out. You mentioned the challenge. They used the challenge late with Harden. I cannot believe they won that challenge. Like that was another game shifter because it just seems like the refs really need to be sold usually it's 100% not the right call. I was like, no chance. Like there's no chance they'll find something here. A pinky touched them or something to get that overturned. And then the final sequence, of this game with Dallas has the ball with 12 seconds left and have multiple chances of it. The absolute defensive energy. One, they closed it out to start and made the difficult just to start. But then the fact where it's a full scramble mode and they just did everything right in the scramble mode. Every closeout, making sure every single space was taken apart. Cause like the Dallas had some looks at that thing, but it was made very difficult by the energy that the Nets brought in that final sequence. And that final sequence, I think, kind of summed up the game from this energy standpoint of, they did some tactical things correctly. And then when it was kind of all that mattered was energy, like being pretty smart, but also energetic, like at the other end to make sure you closed everything out. I thought like that kind of summed up the game in the end too.
Yeah, when you have a quarter, I don't know how they ended up doing ultimately over the course of the fourth, but they opened up Luka and Porzingis after having a strong three quarters, combining for 0 of 10. So I think we get down to that last sequence. It's more than just the high energy and the effort's great, but the Nets, I think, felt comfortable enough to say, let's keep ourselves in front of them. Let's make it difficult for Luka. Then he gets in a back and forth with Porzingis. Like neither one of them particularly wants to have the ball in their hands at that point. But they've both been struggling as well. So it also was this mirroring of everything that the Nets were doing right versus everything that was going wrong for the Dallas Mavericks in that fourth quarter.
And part of that like hot potato piece was that they just couldn't. The Nets were not allowing a good look between the two. Like it was like I just have to give it up. I can't. This is not going to be a good look for me. Like, and it is kind of the difference of like when you have Kevin Durant or when you have these other guys. So there's this slight difference late of what you get between the two superstars, right? Like with Durant, you get rarely going to have a hot potato situation because it's just he can create so many shots that other guys can't. Luka's fantastic, so don't get me wrong, but it was just a little window into the difference, right? Like into the difference between the two teams.
No, 100%. And like you said, they get him trapped there out on the side of the wing there. And essentially between Kevin Durant, I think you have Claxton. We're going to get into him in a second as well. Everybody kind of scrambling and containing them within kind of a 6-foot space where they just kept trying to shift it around until ultimately they swing around to the outside. And if you're the Nets, you want it out of Luka's hands and out of Porzingis' hands. And that's what they got in a missed 3-ball at the buzzer. Going to get into in just a second the other incredible, the fourth star of the Brooklyn Nets, as Doug Norrie likes to say, in Nicholas Claxton and the other defensive adjustments that the Brooklyn Nets made. But first, got to tell you about our friends over at betonline.ag. We know that they've got you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as the football season continues to run along here and the march to the playoffs is well underway. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use promo code LOCKEDON to receive your 50% welcome bonus when you sign up today. First deposit only. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. So as we say, it is the adjustments that Nash makes, and when you only give up 13 points in a quarter, it has to be what you're doing defensively, because by modern NBA standards, it's borderline impossible to get that far into, to go through 12 minutes of action and only have 13 points. The Nets dialed it up in a lot of different ways. A lot of different players were involved, but Nicholas Claxton, who is just getting himself back in after missing 17 games, trying to ramp himself back up, had a really unfortunate showing where he picked up 3 fouls in 3 minutes and didn't get to do much in the previous game. This one, he picked up a couple early fouls as well. But then in the fourth quarter, to your point, leaning into what works. Nicholas Claxton's out there closing it, and he had a direct impact on Luka and what the Dallas Mavericks have been having success with over the first 3 quarters.
Yeah, they put him on Luka and it worked, man. Like this is the window into what you dream about with having Claxton on the team come playoffs. And I'm not using the playoff thing lightly here, because a key that the Nets need come playoff time is a closing unit where they have a defensively versatile big that can switch on to other people's like point of attack. Sometimes guards, like Luka's not like necessarily a guard, but like for all intents and purposes, he is. And the part where Claxton was picking him up, one, it completely worked because Luka was not able to get into a lot of the stuff he was able to do. Like Luka can take advantage of most defensive assignments because he's either bigger than them, quicker than them, or stronger than them, and he uses one of those 3 things to to his advantage in almost any matchup. Claxton
Luka look a little thick out there, by the way. Just
what's Oh yeah, I'm not. Let's not talk about Luka. Like whatever. The next one. I got like a million thoughts about Luka. He's just it's impossible to watch him. Like what Claxton? Yeah. So the part where he's able to stay in front of him, he's super long. So it's like he's super long, so you can't really get good purchase to get around him at times. Even though he's not a super big guy, the wingspan really makes it look like there's no space available just to start, right? Like, and he was. They figured out early, or Nash figured out early, that was working. I think they actually played him more minutes than he probably should have. He looked totally gassed, but it was worth it to keep going with it because it was so effective. And I know it was 21 minutes, and I know there were some fouls that he had, and it wasn't all perfect. And he clanked 2 free throws, and he missed, and he could have probably hammered home a dunk, and he just didn't have the legs to do it. And it was still all worth it because you saw for a minute that when he's fully conditioned, if he can stay healthy, like these are the matchups that he can be on the court for late. And that's so important for what the Nets need. Like, and I'm not using the playoff thing lightly here. Like, this is what I mean. Like, this is the kind of defender that they need late, and that we just been waiting and waiting and waiting on it. And I think we saw a window into it here.
Well, and I think you're 100% right, because the other piece of it is the guy that's been playing so well for Brooklyn, LaMarcus Aldridge. We've also consistently said, right, but he can be a liability for certain stretches and in certain matchups, and that's where Claxton and his ability to pick up anyone 1 through 5 essentially, it changes the dynamic on the defensive end. And one of the byproducts of that is, you saw it. I don't remember the sequences out at the top, but what ends up happening is you force it out of Luka's hands, it forces it to Bullock, and then because you have Claxton and he can extend his defense out to the perimeter, Kevin Durant ends up waiting in the lane, comes over and swats away Reggie Bullock's shot. And it's because he doesn't have to overextend defensively somewhere else, because Claxton is picking up the best scorer on the other team. Now, whether or not they're going to try to create switches off of those matchups, at that point, if you're Steve Nash, you're winning the chess match with Jason Kidd, because you're saying, I'm giving you our young defensive 5, and he is affecting the way your number 1 best scorer, top player, one of the top players in the league, is able to attack things offensively. That right there, it's done, because there's never a part of your game plan if you're the Mavericks where you go, and then what will we look to create a nice matchup away from Luka? That's never going to be the strategy coming into it. So the byproduct effect of Nicholas Claxton being successful defensively is that everybody else's assignment gets a little bit easier, and then the help defense becomes a little bit more effective as well. So like you say, it's 21 minutes, but this is the thing that I love, that we loved going back to last year. It's the thing that we got really sad about when it didn't look so good early in the season. But when you have the group of bigs that the Nets have right now, Claxton's the only guy that you're going to put in. You said playoff basketball. He's the guy that you can put in at the 5 and expect to have success in big defensive sequences.
Yeah, and like he was so good that it actually forced Kidd into an adjustment that I actually think was correct. It just came too late. It was that they were hunting out Patty Mills exclusively on defense, but that was after like the lead had evaporated, right? Like, so it was correct for him to do it, and they made a very coordinated move, because I believe it was like 4 straight possessions where you could see, it's one of these things where it's so clearly you can see with your eyes, like when Claxton is bodying up Luka, it looks like, kids versus counselor day at camp, like where they're just where it's like so obvious, and then Nets were a little slow on some doubles, and Luka really did actually take advantage of that. The problem was it came too late in the adjustment sort of tree, and they just probably didn't get enough possessions out of it actually. Like, you know what I mean? So it was, and so good on Kidd for figuring out, or whoever, Luka and company, for figuring it out late. But they just did it too late. But this is what I mean about another like playoff basketball. Like, that's a very specific late game adjustment that you're making that you see kind of come playoff time, where it's like you pick out the worst defenders, you pick out the weakest links, you make sure that you're going to attack them over and over again. You see it, you see it a lot in the regular season, but this was just like, there were so many clear examples of it tonight. And they just made the adjustment too late, but they had to do it because Claxton was like so effective on Luka earlier in the half, earlier in the quarter. Claxton finished +9, like Kean Johnson were +9 and +8. They were excellent. They were the reason they won. As much as the guys that we talked about at the top, the defense that these guys gave you was almost just as much of the reason that the Nets were able to take it home.
And this is what you need, right? This version of the Brooklyn Nets, again, one of the better defensive teams this year. Like, this is how the Nets can win against good teams, right? Playoff basketball, whatever it may be. Kevin Durant and James Harden, you expect them to do what they typically do. The question is, can Patty Mills step up and be a supporting scorer? He's done that consistently this year. And then it comes down to the James Johnsons, to Nicholas Claxton, to the Bruce Brown. I mean, listen, I'll even give a quick tip of the cap to Bruce Brown, who in random little sequences, when you see Luka going up against him defensively, you're thinking, good Lord, like, Bruce Brown might end up on his back. He denied access on an inbounds pass to Luka. That should never happen. But this is what the supporting cast around these stars has to do. And again, we say this every single time. You don't get too high on a victory. You don't get too low on a loss. But if Nicholas Claxton is going to be able to get consistently into better condition, it starts to balance out this roster a little bit more, and it allows a lot of these guys to lean into what their best skill sets are behind some elite scorers. So, I mean, it was great, man. I loved it. And like you say, they won, So that's why I loved it. If it had gone the other way, I could have been feeling pretty different at the end of it. But the Nets, listen, they stormed back and got the win, and it's just a great game. It's a great game.
There's a couple of those little moments that go the other way that like we have a difference. We're singing a different tune on this. I get it. It's easier to look at the superlatives when you win, but like, and we talked about a couple of those little things. If a couple of those little things go the other way, maybe we're singing a different tune, but we don't have to. They won, so whatever, doesn't matter. All the other stuff.
This is my tune.
Everything was right. Everything was right. Results oriented like that. I'm gonna be results oriented the rest of my life. I'm not gonna the process need not apply here. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you are over on YouTube, seeing those YouTube numbers climb. Tons of good comments in there. Jump into the comment section. Try to reply to everything. That's respectful, and there's try to reply to everything. If you have questions too, we've been throwing questions from YouTube in mailbags for the end of the week. So make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the show notes.
And don't forget, listen, I'm going to start doing this more at the end of each episode. We have some guys that have been awesome and consistently commenting in the YouTube. But Ryan Naughton, welcome to the Brooklyn Nets Locked On Nets subscriptions over on YouTube. Easy Money Sniper Jackson, welcome to the subscribers. You guys are now part of the crew. So you're going to start getting some shout outs over here. And in a game where the Brooklyn Nets did the things that you needed to, made the adjustments, it does bring to mind that I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination. That's Jimmy Dean.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets.
Sausage in the morning.
I was going to say the sausage of the actor.
No, it was only the Sausage King could come up with that type of insightful commentary around life.
Good, because that's what I thought. And with that, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.